Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Thursday night. I kind of miss seeing who I'm talking to. It's just, even though this is terrific, uh, it would be nice to see who I'm talking to and engage with them directly. Uh, Except Marlene, I can see her. Okay. Um, there's a couple of questions here, and one of them is from Carol Martin in Nashville, Tennessee. And she said, "Would you please talk about our effect on," I'm assuming it means the planet Earth, is two round Earth images here. I suppose I should say, and vice versa. Maybe I'll just leave that out. It seems our human intensity and destructiveness may affect the Earth on an energy level. Likewise, our meditation and prayers for peace. How does this work? Wow. Uh, no small question, uh, and filled with tremendous amounts of belief uh, from many, many factions of how one might look at Gaia and the old concepts of a living, breathing earth. You can look at it from that point of view, and I would say that to some degree there is a response related to human activity on this planet. Our thinking, with no offense to anybody, is kind of selfish. When I say our, I mean there's a convergence of ideas that relate to, frankly, making money um, in our world as the leading, uh, let's say, aim of life, uh, and not without any kind of a reality here, because if you don't make enough money to pay for your rent or your house or your mortgage or the food for your families on the table, or enough money for children to go to university, or for you to go to university for that matter, to engage with your hobbies to some degree, uh, what we're dealing with here, to be honest, is a relationship with people being creative and attempting to make money. I don't want to make this talk something that is kind of negative, but our accumulation of plastics from the late 50s and early 60s is unbelievable, as everyone knows who's ever watched the news. And it's flooding actually our oceans with very small particles of plastic, which include fish eating larger pieces of plastic. And it's a basic dilemma. Can't only nail plastics. It's a matter of what can you create that will make you a buck. And that's kind of where it is. So there's an element of selfishness there. And at the same time, an element of becoming important in the eyes of others, an element of trying to engage with life in a kind of a way to be valuable in the eyes of others. And those who are attempting to create a kind of a balance in that by saying, no, look, there's a little bit too much of this going on and we're having difficulty. And there are other manipulations and all kinds of things that are going on in relationship to manufacturing and all over the world. I mean, everywhere. Once we have an aim of this kind, it's very difficult to part with our way of thinking. Those things that tickle us, make us feel secure and valuable, important. It's part of the nature of an 8 billion group, of beings trying to function in what we call a civilized manner. And we have an effect on the earth. Not even talking about the aspect of our gas consumption, coal consumption. But where you can attempt to make a difference, possibly, is do what you can yourself. Sooner or later, you will run into you. You don't want to do this, you don't want to do that. And that's part of living. And anyone who says it isn't part of living probably isn't living. Or, not noticing that they are confronting themselves and then not looking at what they're doing in their own life as well. However, there's all kinds of people who do the best they can, and the best they can is dealing with them. And no matter what that sounds like to one group of people versus another group of people, it's the way it is. Energetically, one could say that scientifically, the Earth is affected primarily by thermodynamics, volcanoes, earthquakes, seismic plates moving here and there, and gravity is a very important issue as well when you're looking at these things. We are kind of very small beings with our focus on the coarser elements of life primarily, even though our cultural way of looking at things may help us to think that we are not focused on coarser things because of our belief systems. Naturally, this is okay. Because that's where we are. Ultimately, as an energetic being, you begin to realize and attempt to understand the impact that you have on others by living the way you do, by emotionally reacting the way you do, by judging the way you do, by laughing the way you do, being relatively balanced in your version of what balance might be, the way you do, and realizing even in that, people all across the world are doing exactly the same thing relative to their way of seeing things and doing things. Our energetic focus on humanity, where it can be actually helpful, may be hard to understand. When we attempt, we meaning any one of us or any one of 8 billion people, attempt to live life in a constructive manner from their perspective, it can look like 8 billion different things. And I'm not subscribing to the idea that everybody has to be the same. This is a dilemma. Diversity is very important because it allows options to enter into the mind of us all, that our option may be only one option. Others maybe have other options. and it can affect us. We may learn from others based on that principle, or we might be reactive and judgmental and say, no, they're bad because they think this way. Has that ever happened? Yeah, it has, because that's part of how we see this journey we call life. Devaluation happens. It doesn't mean it's an abject truth. It just means you do things like that. Softening that down a little bit. How does that affect those of us who are still learning in relationship to living a perfect life? Perfect life is not only financial. Internal living is very subjective, one could say. And unfortunately, we look for cultural acceptability. And we have different lines of reference relative to our upbringing and our domicile, and what is acceptable and not acceptable. In India, for example, if you are living a spiritual life, you don't have to live a life that relates to a belief system. It can be energy oriented. So all beings who are internally energetic to a larger degree are spiritual beings. Those who are not yet there are spiritual beings attempting to get there. So there's no negation. However, there are belief systems that would not condone that kind of an engagement with spiritual life because it doesn't follow the rules of other things. Of course, that's India. No, it's all around the world. It's related to almost every interaction that we have as human beings. If that harsh subjectivity can be softened, then you could honestly say that the core of our species may be helped to be gentled with respect to a pre-thought as to how an invention might hurt our species. But we also have very strong relationships with entitlement that relate to countries, that relate to territories, landscapes, versions of thought. With all due respect, this is what happens here on our planet at this time in our relationship with internal development. So we have lots of things we can be judgmental about, provided you believe that only the way you think is the right way. This happens every day of our lives. And it is understandable because this is the nature of how we think at this point. Now, when you're dealing with energy, it's a different story. You can move towards thinking broader, and then you look around so-called objectively, and you find there's all kinds of things all over the world that are hurtful to other people. I know, Carol, this is not about the planet itself, but it is about the planet itself. Wars occur, battles over ideas, friends get all frustrated with each other because they can't think exactly the same way all the time relative to each other. Understanding that and then beginning to understand something different, gentler inside, that a person grows within themselves, literally through themselves. And this is very difficult for us because we make general rules about how things should be and how they shouldn't be. And we need them. They're very helpful. Keeps us kind of understanding life from a general perspective, whatever culture you happen to be in. But to be in a position within yourself, for example, Carol, for example, if you had the ability to be helpful to your neighbor, if you had one, who might not like a dog. I know you don't have dogs, so I'm picking that up. To cross over into a patch of their territory and do business there. Even though you cleaned it up and you were fine. How do you change that neighbor from being angry at you? Get rid of the dog? How do you change your reaction to him or her? Move? Or is there something that can be done internally if you had an awareness of that energy? Is it possible to engage with that energy and get help within you to soften down so that you make sure that your dog is tied up, for example? I know you don't have dogs. Once again, I'm saying that because other people don't know you don't have dogs. But this is a metaphor. And we run face to face all the time, day to day, within ourselves, to ourselves. We find ourselves everywhere, every condition, every context, every relationship, every willingness that we have inside that is different than anyone else, this willingness. Going slowly in there and backing away from the intensity that it takes to engage in such and such a way, to be honest, creates intensity inside because you're doing something different than what you have normally practiced from the time of your construction of images that are of value to you. This happens in all of us. This is not something that's only relative to a certain few. It's relative to 8 billion people plus. This is difficult because if you slowly engage differently, those reflexes or engagements that you have with life begin to be different with respect to how others are in their life. You affect other people right at the core of our species. Yes, if you meditate and say prayers for peace, this kind of thing, I think that helps. But the person that it must help is the sayer, the speaker. And it does. It softens you somehow. I understand. The next thing that happens under those conditions is past reflexes spontaneously respond and make their place felt because there is an internal fear in each of us as an individual of the unknown, an internal fear that something will occur that is uncomfortable within us, called change. It's true, change will occur, but you will never lose that reflex that you've trained so strongly. But you don't have to comply with it all the time. Sometimes it will be there. It'll automatically express itself. There is much evidence of this. But the awareness of it that you have at that moment will affect you, because you can attempt to, in a few short seconds or minutes, to soften it down. Speak to you. Speak to others around you. Because you can do that sincerely, because you are noticing something inside of you that says, this is not a comfortable thing for me anymore, at least the way it used to be. Because I used to do it without even noticing I did it, one could say. This means that you are affecting others who are similar to you anywhere in the world. Now, that's a big, big idea. But when you think about it, you suddenly realize that you can affect people around you differently by not acting out in a way that you might notice you used to, one could say. This happens to every single person. I would say no exceptions. It also means that with no exception, there are things that you do that you will not let go of, because it's part of the image that you've constructed. And it is the same for everybody. And it's not that you consciously say, I will not let go of that. It occurs so automatically that, because it seems like paint out there on a picture. And without that particular color of paint in that particular picture of you, then you will not know who you are, which is a really great defense. This is hard to take in for all of us. But more and more, the impact of how we are affecting the planet physically relates to the occupants of the planet, the fish, the animals. And we're an animal. And we're at the top of the food chain. This we must kind of rethink. Whatever we affect in the oceans that eat the grasses, that engage with the air, are affected by what we do to the planet. If we spread our rubbish and it's eaten by those who we eat, that's not a pretty thought. It's not good for ourselves. And our cells remake themselves, replenish themselves, anywhere from 5 to 7 years. And this is scientific fact. This is not something that you grab out of the air to spout out to make people afraid. No, that's not true. It's just reality. So we have difficulty in these territories that relate to making us feel secure in our relationship with how we pay our bills and engage with life. And also how we care for other people, or how we don't. We don't understand that when we're not caring for everybody, we're hurting ourselves. We stir up the internal juices, the chemistry inside of ourselves, and it has an effect on us. The more you practice being frustrated and angry and scared, the more you will be frustrated, angry, and scared. It's just the nature of our system, not any great psychological moment. It's just the reality of how our systems work. None of us get away free on this one, unless you're out there and you can honestly say you've never had a reaction to anything that is counter to what you believe should be going on. And that I would call nonsense. Everyone's had a reaction to that, to the smallest of tiny things. And everyone out there has had a reaction to being hurt, to being treated kindly, to being loved. Not too much, though. Just up to the edge of what you have learned how to handle. I'm talking about that because there's an ultimate question with Marie-Josée here in Ottawa. Many questions come out of this one. If you're really interested in trying to be of some help energetically, start with you. Oh boy. Don't start with you as a pinnacle of high ingratiation. Start with you in the middle ground. You're a human being. Treat yourself with respect and attempt to understand that you are a product of this present life and all of it from the beginnings of it relative to you. And the impact of other lives have been there on you. You will react a certain way. Another person, similar upbringing, will not react that way. They will react a different way. It'll be relative to how they think they need to react to be the person that they believe they need to be under those given circumstances. And every one of them, often, maybe not everyone, will believe that no other person has had the experiences that they've had. And it's a complete falsehood. They may not be perfectly the same, but there are tremendous similarities. And not everyone reacts exactly the same thing, the same way to the same things. Also, even though this sounds so silly to even talk about, because we all know this inside ourselves, We would rather see someone else change rather than us. There is the interaction with love that is so strong in us. We unknowingly love ourselves tremendously, regardless of what we think about loving ourselves. We do, the way we are, and we fight to maintain that. That's where energy can help us to find a different balance, little by little, and then look for another one. Don't tell anybody. It's your inner growth. You don't need to broadcast it. It only holds you in that position. And you elevate again, or you put yourself down again. This is not easy, but one thing it will do in creating such an honesty inside yourself is sincerity, a willingness to help. It will bring to bear more awareness, more energy moving in, so you can be aware there'll be gaps inside. Because you used to do this and now you're doing something else, or whatever it is. There'll be gaps, sensing gaps. They can be emotional, they can be quite physical, they can be in the mind as well. Perceiving in the mind. The mind can perceive. I'm not talking about thinking. The mind can perceive an emotion. You can use it to perceive a response physically. If everybody just softened down right now, with the intensity of all of this, if you can soften down and let go just for a few seconds, all over your body, all inside your body, you can almost pick where the intensity is. Maybe the elbows, maybe the belly, maybe the shoulders, maybe the neck, maybe the brow. Now you're starting to perceive. That's where the energy is. Intensity is energy. So where your intensity is, that's where you're naturally moving that energy, because there are reflex positions. Your buttocks area, your knees, your feet, your neck, your ears, your eyes, wherever it is. Try to gentle it down just a little bit. That practice you can do and breathe when you have a reaction to something. When you hear the tones of your voice engaging with your mouth, through the throat center, just noticing. And of course, you have some tools. If you do notice the solar plexus, it's not negative. It's energy coming through that center. You can redirect it upward. Just like an imagined flow, like a cloud. And back again, up through the chest, back again, up and through the brow. As gentle can be. I don't know if you've ever been in a cloud on top of a mountain when the clouds are pretty heavy. You can feel the touch of the dampness on your face, on your hands. You can take your hand and move it like this, and you'll feel the pressure of that dampness on your hand. Just like that. That's soft. For some people, they get accustomed to doing one thing versus another. There's no versus. Do it, soften down. The body may even begin to do something that gives you a clue of what to do. For example, you may start to do the pump, and it may pull back a little bit. The pump will just, if you do it really slowly and gently, energy will be slow and gentle. If you do it with vigor, then it will be vigorous. Gives you a clue in how you engage with life. If you intensify, energy comes in intensely. It's aligning with you to help you to see you as you are. We don't have a thing about that. We have a thing about, certainly we can blame other people for making us intense. In fact, we reflect, we react, we engage, and the intensity occurs because it's a kind of protective thing. Yeah, I know I could have said defensive, but it's protective. It protects the image that you wish to maintain. Very fascinating thing. I learned many, many years ago. When I say many, I'm talking about maybe 25 years ago, when I was teaching in a class. And I had a very strong reflex, which I think was normal for me, to say, to express a certain way because it seemed to be relevant and relevant from my personality's point of view. And suddenly, right over top of that, there was a different way in my mind, different way in my emotions, different way to act physically. It was softer. And I knew that softer way under those circumstances, in that kind of a context, was not normal for me. And I realized that perhaps someone, now this is a perhaps, I agree, but I've had it happen since, and I'm very glad that it has. But others who have engaged with perhaps similar personality styles to mine and made adjustments in theirs to soften their kind of influx, reflex, to act in a certain manner, had a direct effect on my response under those particular conditions. I couldn't get that out of my mind. It was so profound to me. And what a teaching. Yes, I could tell this was my way of dealing with things. And then this other was an act of engagement that was different than my way of dealing with it. And I knew it didn't materialize in my head, my way of thinking, or my emotional reflex to respond in a certain way. It was there. Could I have gone back and used my own? I could have, had I suppose, this is supposition, that I wanted to protect the way I was doing things, but I was interested in finding it a way that would be helpful to the people I was talking to. Because I knew I didn't have all the answers. That's for sure. I just had ideas, lots of ideas from other people, reading and all the rest of it. But this was different. And I knew the difference between the two. One was out of me, and the other was not. So I expressed that, or it expressed me, however you would like to look at it. And I recognized there was so much more in life, in expression, than the independent, individualistic ideals that people like myself, under those conditions, might believe in. How does that affect the planet? Well, the species, the animals, the birds, fish, whatever, live on this planet. Shift how they interact, how they are fed, how we interact with each other, and perhaps the element of rethink might be perceived differently. Yes, we can do rethinks, but we may be able to log in to a deeper level of understanding that is just outside the reactive responses that we naturally tend to protect within ourselves individually. Not a bad thing, not a good thing, just this is how we do things. So I believe that this question is a powerful question and a deep question. So meditation helps your relationship with perception, helps you be willing to open a little bit, unless you fall in love with how you meditate and fall in love with how you engage. But it's love. And slowly, you may begin to love another way of engaging, another way of being involved with you. This is a great question. Thank you, Carol. I really appreciate it. It's a deep one, and it has a strong relationship with universals, or one could say spiritual growth, but also allows us to have the option of being okay with questioning ourselves. So I wish you very well with the questioning of yourselves. And I wish me continued questioning with me, because perfection in our world, non-existent, but always steps that we have, whether they're perfect or not, are part of our continual growing. Hopefully, we can bend in a direction that is helpful to others. There's another question here by Della from Maryland. I'm not sure I say that well. Maryland, I should probably say. However, what is the connection between ourselves as energy beings and music while we play an instrument? And she goes on to say, I'll just say this. I see now how in the past my beliefs about myself, training, thoughts, habits, and patterns have gotten in the way of my practice and ability to learn. She's talking about playing the piano. She took lessons at a very young age. But I wonder why I have this ability to play the way I do. And that is when she plays and tries to be totally constructive, she has a harder time because she's fearful, perhaps, like many of us when we play instruments, of making a mistake. Picture yourself playing any kind of an instrument. I don't care what it is, juice harp, just doesn't matter. And now you're playing on your own, and you're fine. But what if 2 or 3 people are listening? And what if 10 people are listening? And what if 20 people are listening? Are you nervous? Well, you may not be nervous, and you may play well, or you may not play well at all, and you don't care one way or the other. But there is a place that many musicians, many lecturers, many writers, many painters, many theoretical scientists, many people who are engaged with writing music, sports many times have experienced, and they get in a flow. And it's as if that flow is moving your hands. That flow is moving your mind to write this. That concept that just appeared in your mind is never been noticed by you or considered by you. Your engagement with sports, you've jumped, let's say 20 feet in the air and a pole jump. And you've done it 2 or 3 times on a Wednesday. Comes to Friday, you can't do it anymore because you're worried about how the pole is, and you're running and you want to get it in that little groove, and you make sure that you take a leap with the left foot. Oh, gee, I went on my right foot. Oh, I'm talking about something probably hardly anybody has ever practiced or tried, but the same is true for any sport. And suddenly you're skating down the ice. You've got a puck. It's Canada, right? So, and you're moving around. You sidestep 2 or 3 individuals. You're not thinking about doing it. You just did, and you go to shoot, and you draw your stick around and put the puck in at the opposite corner, and the goaltender is fooled, and you score a goal. Rah rah rah. Yep. All of that may be flow, and then you go out and you can't score a goal for the next 3 games because you're too busy thinking you have to be in the right position and doing everything and not trying to blend your physical, emotional, and mental forms with that inner flow that is there for everyone, no matter. But sometimes we are pretty strong with respect to our nervousness and fear about having to control everything the way we think we need to. Nothing negative about that. It's how it is again. It's how we are. We're learning. If that could be such a wondrous thing. We are learning to engage with that relationship with love that isn't focused only on ourselves. And when we let go, it's stronger. And when we try to coerce it, it has to, we bring our rules in that are so tight that it makes us use that flow for the purpose that relates to what we believe we need to do. And that would be the right thing. And we can't get it perfectly right. That is an uncommon response Oh, that it were more common. This natural reflexive response. Many people who have attempted to turn on their hands have been therapists doing a lot of massage work or any other kind of therapy. They have had, they would call intuitions, where intuition is a word where you take credit for something. My intuition. My intuition. How about, let's say, that flow that we all have inside of ourselves enables us to express ourselves in a certain manner that relates to it in a kind of a way. And because we're practicing doing something and we can let go a little bit, then it can help us in our engagement with whatever we're doing. Loving. Once had a question from Marie Jose here in Ottawa about this universal love. And it was involved with, let's say, everybody calls it unconditional love. And how does it change us? Well, in a kind of a funny way. This question of Della's is a relationship with unconditional love. Della didn't have to be perfect to have this response. Any of us have had this involved with arts or expression, writing, I don't care what is sport, art, anything. Anyone who's ever come up with an idea that has really been exceedingly helpful in a set of circumstances to what is going on in this particular context. If they had the awareness inside of them to notice that it wasn't theirs, it was like an idea was presented to them, almost as if you were looking for ideas in your mind, in this brain thing. It became vacuous, empty, and an idea came into it, and you sputtered it out right away. My idea. Or you expressed the idea, hesitated, knowing full well that it just came into your head. It had no precursors involved with it at all. Nothing coming from you. It was just there and it might be needed. And so then you might have said, I have an idea, and you expressed that idea that came into your head, and suddenly you had some, maybe 3 or 4 more words, or 5 or 6 with them, and then you stopped. And the idea caught on because it was just perfect for the situation at that time. That is an aspect of that unconditional loving at a level that can actually engage with you mentally or emotionally or physically. These 3 aspects are cultivated by the intensity or energy in you for the purpose of you engaging with life. But we are not really trained from birth to go looking for anything else that might be constructive other than the ideas that we can come up with based on our previous knowledge. we often talk about ideas like this, like their intelligence, your intelligence. It might also be relative to how you think. You may think as if you're quiet in your mind, and the idea pops out. It's not building blocks, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, P, all the rest of it. It's not in a building block. It's like an abstract mind almost. But in those gaps, those abbreviated instances where you're wondering or considering, or you haven't got a clue what's going on, and you're looking for something to say, and you can calm that down. That also is an aspect of that flow. And there are many levels of that flow. We're multifaceted beings and very complex. At our coarser levels, we're extremely complex. At our multifaceted levels, we're still complex. And we express ourselves relative to how we think we should, based on a context level. And it's a journey. We are growing through us, not we've grown. We are growing and learning. And that learning is an aspect of love. The very willingness, the very hopefulness that a person might have, that they might move from wherever they are to the next step, towards the next level of an engagement with an understanding that's deeper than the one that they can muster right now, no matter what it is. Don't care what it is. That is what might be helpful. We can cultivate this. As Della says, through music, you can keep doing it. Keep turning those hands on. Keep doing it. Also, keep engaging with trying to follow those notes and learning how to soften that down. Soften the pressure, internal pressure. So obviously, when internal pressure increases, there's an intensity to battle against that particular internal pressure. Happens to all of us. You are not alone, Della. Take care, everybody. I think right now what we're going to do is we're going to meditate roughly for 50 to 60 minutes. I wish everyone really a very enjoyable evening after this, and please take care of yourselves. Goodbye for now. And now we'll just begin to do the balancing and the grounding on your own. And take care, everybody.